Welcome to FranchiseWire Live, your source for all things franchising. Remember to subscribe to FranchiseWire Live on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And for the latest in news, events, and happenings in franchising, bookmark franchisewire.com. Now here's the host of FranchiseWire Live, IFPG President, Red Boswell.
Welcome to FranchiseWire Live. I'm your host, Red Boswell, President of the International Franchise Professionals Group, IFPG. We're joined today by another great leader in franchising, Miss Nancy Lanard. Nancy is the founder of, she's a franchise attorney, but there's an extra E on that. She is a franchisee attorney. Nancy, welcome to the call today.
Thank you so much, Red. I'm excited to be here.
Well, honored to have you. Been trying to get on us together for a while now. Nancy, you are in Philadelphia area, and boy, y'all had some pretty crazy storms. You all good now?
We did. Actually, the sun is out. The sky is blue. It's like nothing ever happened. Most of the ponding around the area is dried up. It's amazing, but there was some serious flooding. We had that tropical storm that came through this morning. So It's all past. It's all good.
Well, glad to hear it. My office is, I'm in Dallas, Texas, but most of my team is in North Central New Jersey, and boy, they got no electricity. Phones aren't working. It's they've missed some calls, and they can't even they're trying to reach folks. It's been tough, but thanks for being on here.
Yes.
So we're here to talk. The message is typically for ZORs, franchisors in the industry, but really any business owner and certainly franchisees as well could benefit. And you are an expert. You're an attorney, been in franchising a long time, have a great team, and it's interesting too that you represent franchisees. So, you're not a ZOR. I'm used to interviewing ZORs for the most part. So let's just talk about first, help us understand who you and your firm are, and then we'll talk about what's happening in the world of franchising, from real estate to the future of legal issues to item 19s and what those look like. We're going to hit it all today.
Sounds perfect. I love it.
Awesome.
So my firm consists we are 6 attorneys. All we do is represent individuals looking to evaluate a franchise, and often are actually referred by not only franchise consultants at IFPG and others, but also by franchisors, because they know that we do a good job, that we don't break deals, we turn it over quickly, and we charge a flat fee that hasn't changed in over 12 years. So and we know what we're doing. This is what we do day in and day out. So we evaluate the franchise documents. I make it very clear, if it's an established franchise, it's extraordinarily unlikely that it's going to be a negotiable document at all, that the purpose of this exercise in retaining us is for education purposes, to understand what this lengthy document, both in size but also in the time frame that it will be, is an important document that they need to understand. We've represented even attorneys over the years, as well as franchise consultants who are looking to invest in a franchise opportunity for themselves or for a family member. So that's been something. I was in-house counsel to Nutrisystem 25 plus years ago. Nutrisystem at that time was the #1 weight loss company in the United States, with 1,300 franchise locations and 500 corporate. So I've been on the franchisor side. And when I started my own law firm, which is when they went into bankruptcy, I was handling both franchisor and franchisee legal matters. And I made the conscious decision for my firm about 3 or 4 years ago that our practice was going to be exclusively franchisee side. And the reason for that is that way, any consultant, anyone sending work our way, referring to us, knows that we never have a conflict. And I think that's an important thing, because so many other firms represent both sides, and I think they find often enough that they have a conflict of interest in representing one side or the other in the future. And so we made the decision. We felt this was a very underserved area, actually, to just handle transactional. We don't go into court, we're not litigators, so we never are suing franchisors. We don't handle any disputes of that sort. And so it's a very niche area of law.
It certainly is, but needed and high demand area. So let's first hit a hot topic, real estate. Now, I'm hearing all sorts of things. Some landlords aren't negotiating while others are desperate. How are you represent the Z's, so what are you seeing out there from a Z standpoint?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So that is another area that's a major focus area of the practice is in addition to evaluating the franchise documents, we will set up their entity for them if they're not using ROBS for that, and then we'll handle the lease if it's brick and mortar. And yes, it's been a very challenging time. And unfortunately, I think franchisees, as truly the epitome of a small business in this country, is hurt more than almost anybody else. And it's been a shame. Back in March, when things first shut down, I spent literally day after day after day looking at clients who I had represented for their lease, looking at their leases to see what kind of help we could provide. And I did 30 leases in one day without literally charging anybody anything. And I did that for 3 weeks, where I just was looking at clients' leases to help them out. And
when you say you did 30 leases, what does that mean?
Oh, good question. I'm sorry. I did kind of skip over that. I looked at to see that if there were provisions in each of those leases that we had already worked on that would help them with relief from rent during a closure, whether it was the force majeure, which is also called acts of God clause, or some other area of the lease that they could rely upon and go back to the landlord and argue that they were not obligated to pay rent during that time. I also was on several different advisory boards to several different major franchise brands around the country that had 500 to 1,000 franchisees around the country, and helped them with strategizing for helping their franchisees. These were all brick and mortar brands. So it is definitely an issue. Unfortunately, in the traditional force majeure act of God clause that is in, the standard lease, we've always softened it with provisions and broadened it, but we of course never contemplated COVID-19 type of pandemic, right? Who did? Right. So we never really focused on that. But in early March, we started being very proactive, actually before the shutdown started, and adding to all new leases we were working on a COVID-19 specific force majeure clause that allowed for rent abatement or rent deferral during a government shutdown or during a pandemic. As far as leases that happened before that, unfortunately, in most cases, the landlords, there was nothing in there. It always excluded rent from any kind of force majeure, no matter what. You could be in the middle of a hurricane, you could be in the middle of a tornado, it doesn't matter. And we also did a bunch of articles. I did a lot of blog posts that I sent out, newsletters on business interruption insurance, which is another major issue.
You read my mind. So you actually reviewed insurance agreements as well.
Well, we don't normally, but I was giving advice as far as what to do. And because the reality is that these insurance companies were denying every single claim. And we know, I know that from everything I've read, that not only do I believe there might be legislation that will remedy that someday, hopefully down the road, to provide for legislative relief that small businesses can have for business who had business interruption policies. But also, I think there's going to be a tremendous, and there already is starting to be a tremendous amount of lawsuits against insurance companies making claims that they should be paying those business interruption claims. So my advice to my clients was, regardless of the agent, the local agent telling you no, you need to push this to the point that the company itself rejects it, and then hold on to that, because at some point there's going to be class action lawsuits against these major carriers, and hopefully you will preserve your rights by doing that. So that's a very important topic, I think, right now. Is I'm not an insurance expert, that's not my area of expertise, but I think I always have recommended, really for the last 30 years, that people have business interruption insurance to cover acts of God kinds of things happening. And here we had the ultimate, and yet these companies are rejecting it because they're saying a virus isn't covered, or closures that are mandated by the government are not covered. So it's unfortunate, and I think wrong in so many ways.
We had recently, you're so right, we had a gentleman who had an expertise in that specific area. and insurance agreements, and he went over so many different cases where it may say you're not covered here, but if they forget to say you're not covered there later on in the agreement, different section, but they're required to say it in both places, or maybe 8 places. If they miss one single place of including that as not covered, it's covered. And so that was fascinating for a lot of Z's and Zors who went back and had someone else look at the agreement. Sure enough, boom, got covered.
Yeah, there are law firms that's their specialty, is handling insurance rejections and insurance claims. And I think this is a huge area right now that's going to be a very big area of conversation that needs to be addressed. I don't know if the IFA Legal Symposium is coming up in this month, and I think it's this month, and
virtually.
Virtually, yeah. Well, so is our ABA meeting in October, is virtual even. But the IFA Legal was supposed to be May 3rd, I think, and so now it's been pushed back, and I think it's this month, but virtually. And it would be a great topic to have as a conversation, to be talking about it at the IFA Legal.
Well, no doubt another big topic you'll be talking about is what are we doing with item 19s and how that's getting covered, and maybe a mid-year update. Any thoughts or perhaps suggestions for Zors in that arena?
I'm not the franchisor side per se. I'm the franchisee side. So from the franchisee side, looking at an item 19, there were new guidelines that came out for item 19 disclosures by NASA a few years back. And I think it's very important that every, franchisor certainly comply with them. I think it's not the easiest to interpret. And so I think, having strong guidance from good franchise counsel that represents them is important. I think, unfortunately, not everybody is as candid and straightforward and honest in their item 19. And as an attorney representing franchisees, we don't handle any litigation or disputes, but as an attorney that represents franchisees looking at an FDD, I'm always a little wary of an item 19. It's not something I tend to really have much of a discussion with my clients about, because it's not something that I personally put a lot of weight on. I think far more important to validating a franchise system. Look, everybody looking to buy into a business opportunity of any sort is going to want to know how much money they can make. And so I understand the value of an item 19 to a franchisor. I think it makes total sense. And I think the franchisor that doesn't have an item 19 disclosure is at a disadvantage to any competition that they have. However, from a franchisee perspective, I think that it has to be taken with a grain of salt. There's nobody out there auditing it. There's nobody out there. The examiners aren't, even in the states that have registrations, the examiners aren't auditing it. So how do we know that it's accurate? How do we know that I can tell you that I have had people come back to me a year or two later and tell me that they were completely false, the item 19. And of course, as I said, I don't handle disputes, so I've referred them to other people, other attorneys. But that's problematic. That creates an issue for me as an attorney representing and trying to help franchisees. So I think the important thing that I can tell franchisors is please make sure you're doing it correctly, that you're accurate, that you're not misleading in those numbers, that you are, being completely honest and straightforward in them. Because if you're not, chances are at some point you have a disgruntled franchisee who's going to figure it out.
You will go down hard.
You will, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty rare. But if anything of substance, they've got to be auditable, not audit head, but auditable. And if they're not, boy, you're going to have an upset franchisee, and you're going to have somebody call you out on it, and you will go down hard. So
go down. Yeah,
good advice.
And actually, the same is true with item 7. If you don't have the item 7 stated correctly, I can tell you that's going to be another area where people are going to sue you, because I remember a brand, and I won't, of course, say their name, but several years ago, that was a very hot brand. And I was told by multiple clients of mine 6 months, 9 months later, once they had done their build out and had gotten open, that their item 7 that it cost them 3 times what the maximum was in the item 7. Well, who budgets for that?
Wow.
Right.
That's rescission like that,
Yeah. Well, it's not if you're in a state like Texas or Pennsylvania or New Jersey, where there really isn't a franchise law that's going to protect you from that. So
would federal law not protect you from, what would you call that?
Federal law doesn't have enforcement. They have people to enforce against franchisors for failure to comply with providing FDDs and those kinds of things. But it's really the states that are registration states that really have the ability to require rescission and those kinds of things. In a state like that, like Texas or Pennsylvania or New Jersey, to give a few examples that we just talked about, those states, it would be breach of contract, basically, and misrepresentation, fraud in the inducement, those kinds of things. Yeah.
We're getting deep here. Like it. All right. So Nancy, what you are that, you're such a cool niche focusing on Z's. What can you tell the Zors out there? Hey, Zors, we've covered a little bit already, but hey, Zors, here's where I see Zors messing up, or here's where Zors need to be looking in the near future because this is coming, or this is happening, or this is a trend. Any advice for Zors?
Well, I mean, I think we just went over two areas, item 7 and item 19. But I think, never discourage your development people from, encouraging franchisees or prospective franchisees to talk to anybody that's on the list that's in the FDD of franchisees and former franchisees. And I can tell you that many franchisors do try to discourage that and push the prospects to talk to only those people that they connect them with. And of course, it's human nature for anyone to only want to connect you with people that are happy campers in your system, right? And so I'm there on my initial free consultation with a client saying, you need to call from the list that's in the FDD because you don't know that those aren't people that are just handpicked because they're excellent, franchisees that are making a lot of money and at the top of the echelon. You need to talk to anybody that's on that list. It's your right under federal law. So that's one thing I would say is that they shouldn't be afraid of that. If they're a good, solid system, they should be encouraging their prospective franchisees to call anybody that's listed in that FDD.
Amen and amen. Now, I'll throw the caveat. As a Zor, I would always, requires a harsh word, but I would inform my candidates, you can speak with anybody. We encourage you to speak with anybody, rah, rah, rah. Let me know who you would like to speak with, and I will make that personal introduction for you. That way the Z is not surprised because we've trained our Zs to turn away and not speak with anybody that has not been introduced, because you're going to get a lot of folks try to skirt the system. They got hold of the FDD somewhere free online, or maybe they had one call and got the FDD and they're not calling at the right time. They're not qualified. They're not approved. And so there's a balance there. Talk to anybody, but let me know who you want to talk to and I'll make the introduction. That will validate you and allow them, or allow is not the right word, but you'll get through.
And that's a sign of a good franchisor. Honestly, You're not afraid. Right? You're not afraid. I mean, I think that a good franchisor is someone who, a company that actually is there to find good candidates, that wants good candidates that are there vetting their system because they aren't afraid of what will be uncovered if you look under the rocks, and helps with all of the transition, including educating on what's in the FDD. I mean, I'm amazed that I hear from consultants who say, oh, you don't need to hire a lawyer to review this with you. It's not negotiable anyway. Why would you need to have a lawyer go through it? And you don't really even need to read the FDD. It's just a lot of boilerplate, a lot of whatever. Exactly my reaction, Red. It's like my eyes pop out when I hear that.
That is not an IFBG consultant.
No.
I pray.
And I'm not naming who they are, but you and I both know that there are consultants that are in the midst right now of litigation because of stupid things that they said or didn't say.
That's right.
One of which being that they didn't recommend. And my word to consultants that might be listening to this is that every consultant, every time, should be referring to a franchise attorney, hopefully a franchisee attorney, for the review, because it protects them. And it does protect them, because just having an email introduction, I keep it forever in my system. I have 63,000, I just looked down here at my almost 64,000 emails in my inbox right now, all of which are read basically, except the new ones that have come in since we've spoken. But But yes, 64,000, I don't erase them. And so it protects them if they ever were in litigation, that they can say, I introduced, Joe Smith to Nancy Lanard, and Joe chose not to even call her, or Joe chose not to hire her. But at least I recommended that. I'm not the last one to have touched the opportunity with them. So
Right.
if it goes south, don't blame me. I told him to go find a lawyer to go through it. From a franchisor side, I think it's really valuable for a franchisor to go through those 23 items and explain what's in there from their perspective. And then, of course, that's also what we do, and we go through the franchise agreement and explain that as well. But I think that that's a really value-added thing that a franchisor should be doing, which is describing what's in the FDD and helping, because it's overwhelming. I mean, 300-page document is just overwhelming to everybody looking at it.
I tell you what, something I did, this is just a side rabbit trail here, but as a ZOR and a pretty significant pipeline of franchise candidates, tell you what, most Fran Dev folks, myself, king of the sinners here, can't stand an hour or two conversation on the FDD. It's absolutely critical. If you're not doing it, you're not doing your job. At the same time, ain't no fun. So what I did, I'm a Texan. What I did was I recorded myself going through it thoroughly, step by step, explaining everything. I put it on behind a login, and that candidate was required. One of the steps was the FDD step, and they were required to log in. I had a record that they logged in. This is just little, best practices for the friend evers out there, and it accomplished a very thorough overview. I made sure they went through it because they had to log in to do so, and it saved me a whole lot of time and hassle. So anyway, I diverted the conversation.
I think that's a great idea. You didn't have to do it one-on-one. There's no reason why, if you did a thorough review of each of the items of the FDD, that it can't be a document, a video, whatever, that is canned for all, future franchisees. I think that's perfect.
And you re-record it once a year or twice a year if you update it mid-year. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what other ideas or suggestions are you seeing out there for the ZORs?